Well then, welcome to today's episode of Flow Meter Guy, where the currents of wit and wisdom flow as we explore the journey of people building successful and unique businesses. Joining us is a distinguished guest, a leader in B2B strategy and marketing, and their expertise supports executives in the chemical industry, guiding them to achieve crucial business milestones with clarity and expertise. Well then, young lady, what is your name and what do you do for a living?
Well, thank you for that good introduction. I'm Victoria Meyer. I am president of Progressio Global, which is a B2B consulting and advisory firm, as well as host of the Chemical Show podcast and the Chemical Summit. So, as you've already said, Brent, I work with leaders primarily across the chemical industry to help them achieve more, achieve their strategies, achieve their personal goals, grow their leadership, and influence the world in a more positive way.
And you are one busy young lady. That's all I got to say. High on the social media. Every time I look at something, you're traveling from here to there. So you're packing in the miles there. You ever have a chance to catch your breath and do something fun or some hobbies at home with the family?
I do. Absolutely. And so, so the good news is I've got a small team. So, since starting my entrepreneurial journey, one of the pieces of advice I got was to hire out what you can hire out. So so while you see me on social media a lot, I take plenty of time off as well. And I'm married to my husband, Todd, for 26 years. We have 4 daughters. Which most people say, yes, a lot of weddings. I said, first of all, I'm paying for them to get through college so that they have successful careers and can pay for their own weddings. So,
There you go.
college first, and
There
then
you
we'll
go.
work out the rest of it. Yeah, you know what? I love traveling. So I've had a global career, which has taken me to a lot of different places and really sparked the travel bug. So most recently, spent a couple weeks in California with my family. So a week in San Diego with one daughter, and then a week in Palm Springs with my high schoolers and husband, exploring the outdoors, doing some new things, etc. So travel is definitely one of my hobbies, and one of my core values is seeing new things. I love to garden. I'm not a good gardener, but I like to garden. I grow very expensive vegetables, right?
Oh.
So if you're a home gardener and you know the joke about, how much does it cost to grow that tomato? Well, about $100 by the time you get done with it. So, so for me, it's all about, I love connecting with people and I love connecting with nature and I love spending time with my family.
Now, you're based out of Texas, right?
Yeah, I'm
That's your
located.
headquarters. That's your
Yeah.
that's your central operations as you travel the world with your adventures there.
Yeah.
And as I said, you're a busy girl and obviously a very bright young lady. Where'd you go to school?
So I went to, I graduated from Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. So Illinois Tech with a degree in chemical engineering. I will say, in fact, this is a part of my story I don't often tell. I started at community college. I went to community college for 2 years, as did several of my siblings and a lot of the people I grew up with. I grew up in Marengo, Illinois. So a small farm town outside of Chicago, and did 2 years of community college. Frankly, I was young and I'm sure my parents couldn't really afford to send us all to college. So that was a great launch point for me. Then I went to IIT, did my degree in chemical engineering, started working for big companies, Amoco for a couple of years back when there was an Amoco doing project engineering, and then Quantum Chemical, which is now part of LyondellBasell. And then at that point, I took some time off and did an MBA at Kellogg School of Management, which is part of Northwestern University. It was in my post-Kellogg MBA days that I moved to Houston. I joined Shell coming out of business school with an intent of moving to Houston for 5 years. Well, 25 plus years later, here I am.
Didn't happen, huh?
Yeah.
How about that? How about that? Well, and now all that education that you acquired, and then you moved into the petrochemical industry, or was it chemical industry?
Yeah. I've spent my whole career in the chemical industry. So,
Mhm.
um, and a wide variety of products in several different companies. And the thing that people in the industry recognize, but people in the general public don't necessarily understand is chemicals are everywhere. Sometimes I think chemicals has a bad name, but I would say water is a chemical.
Yeah.
Baking soda that you would
Mhm.
use in your cooking is a chemical. So there's chemical products everywhere. And when you look around, everything, something like 98% of all the products that we see, feel, and touch on a daily basis have the roots in the chemical industry. So whether it be paints and coatings, plastics like on your phone, everything. So I spent a career in chemicals. Again, I started out doing project engineering, right? I'm a chemical engineer. For me, it was about being the spider in the web, understanding a little bit of everything, being very process oriented, and systems oriented, right? And so started out project engineering, helping to build chemical plants. Again, I was promised that I was going to see the world when I graduated college and took this job, and I saw Marietta, Ohio, which is a lovely little city in Ohio. So not glamorous, but it was nice. Um, Baytown, Texas,
Uh-huh.
which is, industrial city, the
Very.
industrial part where a lot of the petrochemical and refining
Sure.
products are, and Augusta, Georgia, and then a lot of time in Chicago. So, chemicals and plastics has been my primary career. So everything from engineering and then moving into manufacturing, how things are done. I always knew that when I was pursuing my engineering degree, in fact, I have a management minor, I knew that I was going to do, 5 years of engineering and then move into quote unquote management, whatever that was. And it was really that journey post MBA, when I joined Shell and then later Clariant, where I really got really into just the strategy, M&A, running businesses, turning around businesses, and doing a lot of great things, visiting a lot of great countries. So one of the benefits of working inside the chemical industry, in particular to a big company like Shell, or Clariant or many of the other companies, is they're global roles.
Mhm.
They're hard. It's not easy to be in
Yeah.
a global role, because the demands are there. And certainly when my family was young, that was really pretty stressful. But it took me to places I had no idea that I'd ever visit. Right.
How about
And
that?
so that's been a really cool part of the journey. So I did 25 years or thereabouts in corporate. And in 2017, I left Clariant after helping them do some make some strategic business decisions, was starting a plant, doing a joint venture, and putting it together. And I left Clariant and I kicked the tires. And at that point, I said, I, I think I'm better off working outside of these big companies than inside of these big companies. And that's when I really started my entrepreneurial journey, and
Mhm.
launched my own business.
Launched your own business. So let's define what your business is then.
Well, my business is changing. So this is the beauty of being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, is that, there are multiple inflection points. Where I started versus where I am today is kind of two different places. So with Progressio Global, when I launched it, it was really about doing um, consulting, strategy, growth, market oriented consulting work. And I work with a number of great companies to
Mhm.
help them take this great idea that they had and actually implement it in a true strategy. I thrive at getting, at the level where you're really working about, well, how does this really work? Right.
Mhm.
Let's take that idea and let's make it something practical. And so I, was worked with a number of companies along the way to help them really implement their strategies, define their strategies, understand what their companies do. Um, 2020 and 2021 marked a real pivot point for me. Not just because of COVID, right? Because we all had quite a pivot in 2020. The world did. But 2020, November 2020 is when I was on a goal setting retreat with my husband. I had gotten introduced to podcasting and falling in love with the medium of podcasting. And I like to listen to podcasts that I learn something from, that are motivating to me, maybe inspirational, mindset focused things, business focused things. And I recognized there was this huge gap in the chemical industry, in the space that I work in, for podcasts. There's a couple, but they weren't they weren't meeting what I thought I needed and what I thought others needed. And it was in November of 2020. I was on a goal setting retreat with my husband. I was out for a walk on Sunday morning, listening to a podcast. I wish I knew which one it was because that would have been really anchored it. But I had this moment of clarity where I'm like, it's the chemical show. It just keep it simple. It does
The,
not have to be
the
more
epiphany,
complex
huh?
than that. It was
It
my
hit you.
epiphany, that moment of clarity. And I finished that walk. I got back to our hotel room and I logged into I don't know, probably GoDaddy because that's my go-to podcast thing. And the website was available, thechemicalshow.com. I said, okay, that's a sign. I bought it right then and there. 3 days later, I was talking to a business coach, my business coach, and I said, hey, I'm starting this podcast. And he's like, okay, great. Would you like me to introduce you to the company and the team that helps me with my podcast? I'm like, yes.
Sure.
And the Chemical Show was born. So the first episode launched in April of 2021. As we record this, we are celebrating our 4-year anniversary. And I would say that really marked an inflection point for my business and for what I do.
That's quite a transformation, quite a trail. And you identified, well, you're B2B, you're in a marketing person, you found the hole in the marketplace or your niche.
Yeah.
And so myself in the niche oriented too, I was delightful to see what you had done. You found a spot and now you found that spot. Now there's another chapter which you need to go on, which I've discovered is now you're teaching people in this niche market, in addition to that industry, the other people that would like to get into the podcasting arena, you're
Yeah.
now a teacher or
Yeah.
an educator or a master class. You have a whole host of things. Tell us
Yes.
about the next chapter that you're involved in.
Yeah. So the next chapter, and so if we fast forward, I launched the Chemical Show. I've really pivoted to a media business. I had this recognition that if I run this podcast as a business, as a media business, there is value. So first of all, it provides value to my audience, but it provides value to other companies that want to get access to my audience, whether they be sponsors or advertisers or people that want to be guests. So that was part of the journey. I launched the Chemical Show in 2023. I launched a conference called the Chemical Summit. And then here in 2025, I've had this realization that as I talk to other podcasters and meet other podcasters, like they need to learn this stuff. And this stuff is the fact that niche podcasts can be really profitable. And so I am in the process of launching a course called Podcast Profit Blueprint. I've got a master class, and I've also actually got some just free resources to help small niche podcasters, particularly those in a business or a B2B space, become profitable. Right. So, and Brett, obviously, that's where you and I got connected when I guested on another podcast and talked a little bit about this story. And the story is when you think about your podcast as a media business, it changes your approach and your role. So in podcasting, we all hear about the biggies, the Joe Rogans of the world, Mel Robbins, the Kelsey brothers. They're striking multi-million-dollar deals to share their points of view, their content, their guests, etc. Great, awesome. And yet there are, something like 1 million podcasts across the world, 200,000 of which are active at any point in time. And the vast majority are small, targeted, niche podcasts. In fact, Buzzsprout says that to be in the top 50% of podcasters, you need to get 29 views or listens in the first 7 days. 100 downloads gets you to the top 25%. The top 10% have 1,000 downloads in the first 7 days. So these million download podcasts are actually few and far between. And so what I do with my coaching and advising and coursework that I do with podcasters is help small niche business podcasters figure out how they create value, and how not just how they create value like a media business, like a magazine does, like a newsletter
Mhm.
does, like trade media. And I'm so excited to be able to share that with other podcasters because that information is really hard to find. I fortunately had some advisors, not in podcasting, frankly, in marketing, who coached me along the way when I was on this journey to build a profitable podcast. And I'm really excited to be able to help others with that as well.
That's great. So, bottom line, if you're a podcaster or a videocaster, whatever you are, it's a hobby until you make it profitable.
Yes.
And that's the most people probably burn out before they make it a profit unless it's a heartfelt quest that they're after.
Yeah. Well, and even then, what I think is interesting, Brent, and you've probably seen this if you're in any podcast communities on Facebook or elsewhere, people will say, "Well, I do this because it's fun," or "I'm doing this because I'm providing a service." Well,
Mhm.
you know what? Your doctor provides service and they get paid very well for it, right? Um, the postal worker provides a service and they get paid for it. There is no reason that as podcasters, we are providing a service. We love, you know what? I think most people love what they do. Otherwise, you don't do it because it is
Sure.
work. Um, Especially if you're doing it for free, which is what most
That's right.
podcasters are doing.
That's right.
Um, you can get paid for doing what you love. And the trick, it's not really such a trick, but it's really about finding companies, businesses that really value the same things you value, that value what your audience values, and is willing to invest in you.
That's quite amazing. And at the same time, if we digressed with your
Yeah.
chemical shell business, you've learned how to make that profitable as a
Yeah.
business in a new way where you would bring on experts and in some cases get some sponsorship with people that wanted to
Yeah.
expand their marketing horizons. And you're kind of cutting the ribbon in something like that. It looks like a new area that other people should also get into, but it's also the services that you offer.
Yeah. So I'm still, so the media business is part of it. And I don't mind sharing, and I've shared this candidly with other people. Some of my interviews are paid interviews.
Mhm.
I modeled that on what trade magazines do. If
Just like,
you look
okay.
at trade magazines, and it exists in your industry, right? I'm
Mhm.
sure in the flow
Sure.
meter industry,
Sure.
there's more than a few trade magazines or newsletters or whatever. Many of those interviews that are in featured articles are paid spots,
There you go.
right? So this is being done. And so I think to me, this is about the pivot of thinking about your podcast as a media business
Mhm.
allows you to pivot. Um, I also, while I've built this and it's been successful, and actually, and companies do want to sponsor, they want access to my audience, right? So Brett, this. I talk about the podcast value triangle, which is around getting access to your audience, your influence, and your authority. And those are the three nuggets and buckets that people want. And people will often tell me, "Oh, I'm not an influencer." And I'd say, "Well, have you ever recommended a restaurant? Have you ever suggested somebody, hey, this is my new dentist. I think you'd like them as well?" You're an influencer. Um, as a podcaster, one of the benefits is people get to know, like, and trust you. And people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And sponsors, companies, your guests want access to that as well. And that's one of the things that I've learned, and the things that I really love sharing with others is just reframing your thinking about it. And Brent, I'll tell you, I went for a long time. It's kind of almost apologizing. I've got this little podcast. And one of my friends kind of elbowed me sharply one time. And she's like, "No, you have an amazing podcast." She's like, "Own it. You need to own what you do." And so that's the other piece I advise people is own it. You don't need to apologize for what you do. The reality is, um, nobody's paying your bills and feeding your family. They might want to or help you to. They're not helping. They're not owning your business. They haven't done what you've done. No matter what part of business that you're in, whether in Brent, you're an entrepreneur in multiple ways, right? So with your business, with your podcast, there are huge opportunities. Own it. share it, talk about it, and don't be afraid to say, I did this.
So much for high technology, huh?
I know,
It's
I
been
hear
going
you.
out.
You got
I got all kinds of
ring,
people in
ring.
the building, and the thing is
Well,
ringing there. Well,
well,
that's an
maybe
edit
we want
spot.
to, maybe that person wants to be part of our conversation.
That's what. Maybe so. You see how you reach out there?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I would have to say you'd be silly not to attend any of Victoria's upcoming classes in media there.
Thank you.
Me, as a business owner in a niche market, we wanted to share our information. We attended some of the podcast adventures out there.
Yeah,
It's a clique of people that like to share information.
yeah,
She was one of the instructors at one of the places that I attended to. And this has evolved dynamically with your me just looking in your social media. I just happen to be in a similar niche world at least,
yeah,
but at the same token there, you're a media machine at this point in time.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
really what it's turned down to, where people that want to get involved here with this type of marketplace. And in addition to that, it's just growing your business. It's just another
yes.
tool. Big change that I've seen in the marketing world is I'm an old guy, the old print advertisement, people used to spend 5% of their budget P&L on advertising. And now with the electronic marketing, they're spending 5, 10, and more percent
Oh,
on the
really? So it's
media side,
increased, you see?
increased dynamically because of people
Yeah,
like yourself have another level of exposure
yeah.
to grow their businesses.
Yeah,
So
and I think one of the pieces, Brent, you and I talked about as before we got started is the role of video. So obviously, you're a video first podcast, which
yeah,
is amazing, but also this role of short form video. Frankly, not even necessarily talking about the product, right? I mean, so the beauty is you can talk about, you can be on your podcast sharing, and people are looking up, well, what is this flow guy? And what is the business? And and so I think this aspect of we are in a period of rapid evolution. Of marketing, of media, of interactions and decision making. And, video is part of embracing it. Podcasting is part of embracing it. I sometimes will tell people, when we talk about podcasting as media, when we talk about the evolution of marketing, and you think about the fact that newspapers have been around for what, 1,000 years?
yeah.
Well, probably since the was it the Gutenberg printing press, or one of those printing presses. So close to 1,000 years, hundreds of years, and so they've gotten years of experience and sophistication in this. When you think about print marketing or audio marketing, that's been around for years. As we move into social media marketing, as we move into podcasting and video, we are still in the early days. Um, Early days developing, growing, and continuing. So I think that's super exciting to me because we're still at the front end of this journey.
So get ready. There's still some room if you want to get involved in the
Yes.
podcasting media.
Yeah.
Well, I'm exhausted.
I know. This has been fun.
You-
I'm really appreciate you inviting me
yeah.
to be part of the Flow Guy. This has been really cool, and I've enjoyed getting to know you recently,
So
Brent, as well.
let's wrap this up. So we heard about Victoria and
Yeah.
what she does, and so how do they connect with you if you move forward with these other programs to help us become better podcasters, better involved with media, and then of
Yeah.
course anybody involved in the chemical industry?
Yeah. So I will say, so first of all, my podcast is called thechemicalshow.com.
Okay.
There's actually a page on there for podcasters. And so if you are a podcaster and you want to learn more about podcasting, I've got some free tools and resources. That's where I have my masterclass listed, et cetera. So that would be at thechemicalshow.com /podcaster. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm going to just be candid and say, I kind of segregate a little bit the two sides of my business. From a chemical industry perspective, I am all over LinkedIn. That is the best place to find me. As I grow and do more support for podcasters, that focus is on Instagram. So you can find me at Victoria King Meyer on Instagram. And I'm on Facebook, but I don't expect Facebook requests from people I don't know. So, good luck with that. But Instagram is the place to go. And so, that's the best place to find me is LinkedIn, Instagram, or thechemicalshow.com.
How about that? How about that? Well, I would like to say thank you, Victoria, for your time today. Well then, I hope you have found this conversation of interest. If so, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you on the next video.